And then the other thing I thought we'd get into a little bit as a tangent, because it's a good one, right? One of the main mistakes I made for the sake of my own sanity, right, was trying to learn a little bit from people who know a lot more than me about the economics of the industry. Like, basically, I wanted to know, like, I thought of it as like, put it this way, I had a relative who was a plumber. I was thinking of it like a plumbing system. Like, what are the inputs? What changes? What controls this aspect? It's kind of machine-like when you understand some of the elements, right? Sadly, the reason I say I almost ruined my sanity is because learning even a little bit, when I would then turn around and try and explain it to other people, I just was encountering people who have no concept of how the economic side works. They just say words, like they say terms like salary or like, but they don't know what it means. They don't know what the economic, what are the pressure points? What are the triggers? What are the mechanisms at play here, right? So what I wanted to address was, when you say that, right, it's basically the same thing Cloud9 said when we made Flashpoint. It's that the salaries are way too high to justify based on what you get back from the tournament organizer, like an ESL, etc., the revenues. Therefore, like in the long run, you are just bleeding money. You survive with VC money, and until this has changed, it's just a race to the bottom. You know, you're all going to race and be bankrupt, or like you have to increase the revenues. Now, what everyone said then was, they go, well, that's rich, isn't it? Cloud9 and the other orgs that pumped the salaries up, now you complain. I really genuinely want to turn around and say, what do you think a salary market is? Because I've got an analogy for them that might make sense for a second, right? First of all, let's just hypothetically, because a lot of idiots won't even be able to get past this, but if you can, it's good. Hypothetically imagine that a lot of people in MMA use performance-enhancing drugs. Maybe they just use different ones than you know, or they have the latest ones, or maybe there's even people using old school anabolic steroids. I don't know if they're, I imagine they're a lot smarter nowadays. It's probably more like the EPO level of like Lance Armstrong. I'm probably thinking they're like smart, etc. But basically, think about it logically, right? If all the people in your weight class in the UFC take steroids of some type, performance-enhancing drugs, and it helps them get faster, stronger, like recover quicker, more endurance, if they get all those benefits, right, you can choose not to. You could be the guy that they're suggesting is the guy, just don't pay more salary. You could be that guy, right? But I imagine in the thought exercise, a lot of people could understand your chances of being the champion are going to be very low because you're in an arms race and you're choosing not to buy arms. Like, you're going to lose the war. So when people say that about salaries, I really wonder what the fuck they mean, because there's no salary cap in Counter-Strike. So did they want, right, Cloud9 to say, right, well, I pay my players, let's say years and years ago, $10,000 a month, and now a bunch of other orgs, maybe Immortals when they came in with no Winston, maybe FaZe Clan, I'm picking the obvious ones, Optic, maybe these orgs came in, and the way they got their players initially was they said, I'll pay you 15,000. Right, apparently, Lopez, they want Cloud9 to go, sorry, that would be unsustainable, so we're going to stay at 10,000. And they actually genuinely think you could just keep operating your team, keep all the same players, you can beat those teams, and magically you can just not... Like, what I don't think they seem to understand is, as long as you're in Counter-Strike, we're all going to get dragged along by the people who inflate the market. There's no way to stop it, as far as I can tell.
So put another way, what people don't understand, it's a pretty, the Econ 101 lesson is... the prices are set by the marginal buyer. It doesn't matter what 100 other people think. If there's one person who's willing to pay more, that's the price. That's how prices are set. It doesn't matter what 100 people think is the fair price, so long as there is one person or group or team or whomever who's willing to pay more, they are going to be setting the price.
Oh, I'll give you a great example.
Because the other side will want to make more money.
Here's a fun one for you. So obviously the most famous comic book in the world is Action Comics #1 that featured the first ever appearance of Superman. It's the most expensive comic book ever, right? It's the one where he's lifting a car on the cover. And I don't know what it would be, but I'm going to guess it probably costs 6 figures now if you want like the mint condition one of that. Basically the example you're giving here, right, is a fan going, but I want to buy that comic. So why has someone inflated that to $100,000? It's like, because someone was willing to pay $100,000. Yeah, but it's not worth that. It's just an old comic from like, yeah, we know that, but the problem is he bought it. So if you want it, you're going to have to come with your 100,000. No, but I think it should only be worth 10,000. Listen, we can have that conversation. By the way, if you haven't noticed in life, the word that ruined a generation was should. Should is like, we just enter your fantasy land now. Listen, I'd love to live there. I have to live in this reality though,
I mean, the other thing is like, given that it's an open circuit, and if you think about, there's a bunch of organizations that have been around for a very long time. You think,
sure.
Like G2 now, you think Navi, you think MIBR, like many of these organizations have long histories, Fnatic, for example, NIP. On the other hand, let's just say that you are somebody who wants to start a team. Here are the ways for you to get into like a tier 1 respected esports. You can pay tens of millions to get into the big franchise leagues for, the Activision properties or League of Legends. That's not accessible to most people. You'd have to be very wealthy or raise a lot of money. And, if you're just starting something, it's going to be very hard for you to do that. And by the way, the game publishers may not let you in, even if you have the cash, depending on who you are and who your backers are, etc. On the other hand, you could enter an ecosystem such as Counter-Strike, which is open and has no restrictions. No, first of all, you're not paying any buy-in just to build a Counter-Strike team the way you do in League of Legends or Call of Duty or Overwatch. And on top of that, you still have to pay for the players in those leagues too. So now all of a sudden, it's very clear. If you need to get into esports, you're building a team, you probably want to get into Counter-Strike. It's the easiest. It has a massive fan base. There's lots of tournaments. You don't have to be the actual very best to become notable and get to play big tournaments and be relevant and have a chance to build a brand around that. It's the most accessible one. At the same time, again, all it takes is one person to set the price. Now, if we go back, because this is the know-it-alls, we go back all the way to the 1.6 days, there is one team, Core, that was one of the all-time greats, has arguably the best 1.6 player of all time on their roster. And it was a famous joke. People always said they just can't, they just get so unlucky every single time. They played for 8,000 different organizations. It wasn't like Karn, who played for Fnatic his entire career. It wasn't, wasn't like some of these other guys who just stuck to one roster the entire time or one tag. They would play for probably between 5 to 10 different tags, sometimes again, reverting back and forth. And people always ascribed it to just bad luck and said, we just get unlucky. The reality is that, as you and I both know, and some of the other who were involved in the industry at the time know, they got a bunch of offers from the tier 1 orgs. They could have joined some of the other very well-known 1.6 orgs and played for them their entire careers. The difference is... I think even, by the way,
I'll confirm that. I think at the end of my time in SK, we were trying to sign them.
Yeah. So again, they had that opportunity, but there was an incremental buyer who was setting the prices, who would offer a couple €100 more a month, which was like the equivalent of a couple thousand more a month now. And they would always sign for them because they had the most money. Now, the problem was when that didn't work out, they ascribed it to bad luck as far as I could tell. And that's why they always changed and went to a new place. And instead of going for the SK or trying to go for the Fnatic, they went for Vitriol.
Someone you never heard of. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes it works out that way, but they beat up the prices nonetheless. Now, in today's market, many of the organizations have raised pretty significant funding from private investors, whether it's family offices, other types of investors, sports teams, strategics, etc. And therefore, you don't necessarily have an option to just not be in a game. I mean, some of us have more flexibility than others, and it depends a little bit on the communicative strategy, but it'd be pretty hard for us to say that we're just not going to have a Counter-Strike team for MIBR, given where the brand is.
Yes.
Therefore, you need to have a brand. Now, we were actually put in this position effectively twice last year. Our company, which is, we've seen now that there were no higher bids, contrary to what was communicated publicly, I think, at the time. But we were effectively given a price and told this is the price that it's going to take. And I think everybody on the other side of the table just figured we can't say no, and our only chance is to say this is what we're doing, and that's how it's going to go. And there's no way around it. Only we decided that that's not an acceptable outcome for us. But not everybody. I don't know that it's. By the way, I think everybody lost in this scenario in the short term.
That's what I always said. Yeah.
I think in the long term, we made the move that's going to have short term pain but be helpful in the long term. But I think everybody lost in the short term, especially the fans. But that's what happens. And to go back to the earlier point is, if I'm starting a new organization tomorrow, I'm raising money from investors I know, I'm starting an organization, I'm coming into Counter-Strike, I'm going to find out who the best players are who are running out of their contracts in the next 6 months. I'm going to go to all of them, and I'm going to offer 5K or 10K more a month. So why can I pay more? Because I don't have a choice. I either don't have a business at all, or I overpay. If I overpay, it might still work out. That's the incentive structure. I'm not saying I would do it or recommend doing it, but I can understand why somebody would do it. If their own entire business is, I'm going to build a successful Counter-Strike team, it might be better to overpay, even if that gives you some baggage that's hard to get rid of later on, if the other outcome is, or other option rather, is that you don't have a team in the first place. So it's very obvious to see why the market in an open circuit, it's structured in a way that's always going to end up in the same scenario.